Okay, let's go now to the Detroit Pistons, who have a pair of really interesting rookies in Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, both of whom are putting up numbers, and I don't know how impactful they're actually being. It's very good that they're out there and getting these reps while this team is bad, but they're really kind of out in the wilderness right now. It feels like a lot of the time, because that team just does not run like I hate watching them play. I'm going to be honest. Like, I just hate watching the Pistons at this point. They run like these weird, like post duck-ins for Sadiq Bey and Bojan Bogdanovic all the time. And it's not a ton of spread pick and roll. And I get that, like, they don't have personnel to really do that all the time, but like, you know, what can you do? And then defensively, we'll talk about some of this stuff with Jalen Duren, but like, I think a lot of their guards outside of Killian Hayes really, really struggle with ball screens, and it puts a ton of pressure on Duren. And again, I'll get to Duren in a minute here defensively, but like it just doesn't feel all that great in terms of even the process does not feel great to me for Detroit. And like, I don't know if this is like a thing where maybe it's gone a little bit past Dwayne Casey at this point. Maybe it's time for a change there or something, like just a shake-up move. But the process does not feel awesome when I watch Detroit as much as anything.
So they really miss Cade Cunningham. And not just for his talent, but for how naturally good he is at involving others and just being a high-quality decision maker. The offense is clunky, but the theme of this podcast, in my mind, thus far, has been about keeping the game simple for your young players and allowing them to find consistency. If they know what their role is going to be and they can consistently produce within it, you get a positive usage out of them. And I keep looking at Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, and particularly with a guy like Ivey, like he'll go out there and he'll score 30 points one night, and then he'll get one in 18 minutes the next. There's, particularly with Cade Cunningham out, a lot of opportunity to play through Ivey on the offensive end of the floor more than the Pistons are really doing, and to change and kind of cater their attack to it. Again, you mentioned the mismatch post-ups and the things that they're doing with Bogdanovic and with Sadiq. I think this is the time to lean into Ivey a little bit more to just see what he's made of. And I'd like the Pistons to do that more over the next few months and the closeout of the season. I don't think Ivey's necessarily earned a super long leash, and there's a fine line to walk between giving a player that responsibility before he's earned it and just wanting to see what he's made of. But I think that the Pistons have a lack of offensive creation and other avenues that kind of leads me to believe that they should lean into Ivey a little bit more on offense. I don't know if that's something that you feel or disagree with there, Sam.
I talked about this a little bit with Jason Timpf on the last podcast, and he's really excited about Jaden Ivey. And he kind of brought up the idea if he likes him, and I agree with him. And it's something that I talked about pre-draft, likes him a little bit more as a almost like second side playmaker who like grabs and goes in transition and is like an immediate outlet in transition. And then like Cade bends the defense and then hits Jaden on the weak side. And then Jaden's like slashing and 45 cutting and just like using his athleticism to get downhill as quickly as possible. I think that's the word with Jaden Ivey. Like finding ways to get Jaden Ivey downhill is how you win. And feels like the Pistons haven't taken the best advantage of that yet. They do run some interesting dribble handoff stuff for Jaden, which helps him like get moving before he gets the ball. I just watch them and it gets a bit frustrating for me, I guess, in terms of trying to determine what makes sense for them structurally, I guess. Like Cade Cunningham is the centerpiece moving forward for them. And without him, it's kind of hard for me to navigate like how to make the rest of these guys better. Like they do have Killian Hayes, and Killian Hayes can do like a reasonable facsimile of Cade sometimes, but it's not consistent enough because he's not enough of a scoring threat for defenses to take seriously. And I'd almost just like to see them run more like spread pick and roll, maybe with Jaden. Maybe you just run like a crazy amount of like spread ball screens with Jaden Ivey, as opposed to running like right now he's running like 5 per game, according to Synergy. Maybe just run like a shit ton of them, right? Like just go nuts and see if you can create real chemistry with him and Jalen Duren. Because the other thing with, moving to Jalen Duren now, I feel like they haven't really taken advantage of him as like a pick and roll downhill lob threat enough yet.
Yep.
I feel like he can do that, and I feel like he has done it in moments this year, but we haven't seen enough of it yet. A lot of his offense comes dunker spot, lobs that way, or grabbing offensive rebounds, like the Andre Drummond thing, which I referenced in the story I wrote today. Like, it's a lot of Andre Drummond vibes when I watch Jalen Duren, and that's okay. He's 18 years old, 19 years old still, and is, I think, the youngest player in the NBA and is still figuring out what he needs to do to be effective on the court. But like, get him more involved in like heavy ball screens and get him downhill. Have him rim run as hard as he can toward the basket. Try and reward him as much as you can, right? I don't know. It feels like the process is off to me. And then like defensively, I don't think Jaden's been very good defensively at this point, just kind of straight up. I think he's really struggled to get around ball screens. And then on the other side, Jalen Duren, they put a lot of pressure on Jalen Duren because the guards do struggle to get over screens. But like even Duren is like not that active. It feels like he just kind of sits back. A lot of the time he has like his hands down a little bit. It feels like he's not taking up as much space as what he's capable of. Like Jalen Duren's almost 6'11" with a 7'5" wingspan, physically enormous, huge hands. Like he could really, really make an impact in these plays. He moves well enough to make an impact in these plays. And oftentimes it just feels like there's not quite enough activity there defensively. And I think he's willing to do it. Like we saw him play pretty high level defense out of ball screens at Memphis. Maybe he's like a little bit tentative right now in terms of like what he can do to not get beat. But then like there was a game against the Magic recently where like he just got like completely turned around by Markelle Fultz, who just like kind of split a side ball screen, and Duren like turned his hips and like turned back and like he was like, wait, where did he go? It's interesting trying to navigate all of this when I think the process is a little bit off, and trying to contextualize that when discussing these Pistons rookies as they navigate their first season where they've been productive, but like how much, none of it's translating to winning. How much of it you put on them versus the process? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I don't have a good answer for you, particularly on defense. Like if anything, all of the focus on a young big like Duren should be on his positioning, his activity, just how sound and locked in he is on the defensive end of the floor, because that's traditionally speaking what's so important for big men to bring to the table. When we talked about Indiana and Oklahoma City, I think feel is something that was evident in a lot of the young players that they've drafted or acquired.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there are enough high feel players on this Pistons roster, particularly when Cade Cunningham is out for the year. And it translates to a lack of those connector pieces, guys who can just steady the ship, involve somebody. Like, how good would Detroit be if they had Nembhard? If they had just a smart, cerebral, like connector guard who has decent size, can operate out of the pick and roll, maybe throw some more of those lobs to Duren, simplify things a little bit more for Jaden Ivey. Like, they don't have that veteran or that feel in the backcourt right now. And I think that that's what we're seeing, kind of a free-for-all on the offensive end, where some possessions it's Ivy coming off handoff. Sometimes it's Killian Hayes trying to do too much. Other times it's Bogdanovich and Bey ducking in, and just everyone's searching for offense to come from somewhere, that there's no one guy who can take the ball, slow things down, steady it, and organize it. I am worried. I'm just last thing there on Jaden Ivey. I am worried about the defense. Like you had mentioned, I think it's as much effort as it is technique and anything else. And that's kind of concerning to me right out of the gates.
Yeah. Again, I just struggle with all of it because I think so much of their process is a bit flawed at this point.